So hi, I'm Richard Lang, and I'm here with my friend Amaranatho. And Amaranatho I have known for many years, and first met him when he was a monk at Amaravati Buddhist monastery in England. And while I have known him, he has left the order, and he came across headlessness whilst he was still a monk. So there are lots of interesting things to talk about Amaranatho's experience of meditation, Buddhism, headlessness, coming out of the order. So welcome, Amaranatho.
Lovely to be with you, Richard.
Yeah,
Really
great.
lovely.
Yeah, great to see you. And we did do an interview years ago, actually, at one of the Salisbury gatherings, which was a video interview, which is on our YouTube channel. And there you were a monk still. Let me just set the ball rolling by asking you just to introduce yourself, give a bit of background. And one of the questions that I'm curious about is why you went into the monkhood, why you became a Buddhist monk. But you could perhaps sort of just give an idea of what led up to that and where you're coming from.
Yeah, I can do that. So just as a preparatory for this talk we're doing, I actually listened to that podcast. I listened to that video and watched it, and it was very interesting to see myself there in my robes. I've been out of the robes now 7 years, and that was already a few years before that experience, and just to see the youngness of the way that I was speaking then. It's really interesting to be able to explore this with you. So my journey into being a monk, in a way, was a journey of a sort of reverse of the way people do life, which is I was very successful at a young age, and I worked in the computer industry around 21, and travelled all around Europe in that job, and then I was made redundant in the 80s, I think that was. I went to university and I got a degree in artificial intelligence, and I realised I didn't want to work in the computer industry again. I'd already had all that success in a way. So my goal was to go travelling, and so that's what I did. I went travelling for nearly 4 years around the world.
So you were how old at this point, roughly?
So I was about 20 when I started travelling. I was about 24 or 25. I went to university as a mature student, Sussex University, and so on that travelling gig, if you like. So I was hitchhiking. I hitchhiked mostly, pretty much around the world, and I wanted to experience meditation. That was part, bungee jumping, meditation, you name it, I was going to do it, type of thing. And I'd already had
Were you interested in spirituality?
That's a whole story in itself.
How long have you got?
How long have you got? Yeah, okay. So we'll do a little bit, we'll do a side step into that, if that's all right,
Yeah.
which is, so I was brought up Jewish, and I was quite strongly into Judaism, and I sort of lost my faith when I was a teenager. I got bar mitzvahed, which is this Jewish rites of passage, and the rabbi said to me, a person that you sung so well, but the person that sung so well like that, they left the tradition. It's as if he knew something.
Ah.
And
Why did you leave?
I think because now I can say, but in the beginning there, I couldn't get the tradition to work. I couldn't get the technology to work. I couldn't find God. I didn't know where it was.
You sound like a computer engineer. I can't get it to work.
Yeah, it was like that. I mean, that's the interesting thing about going into computers as well, and having that sort of rational mind and not being really connected to one's emotions or understanding of that. So this whole travel journey, in a way, that's why I studied artificial intelligence, even because in order to make computers like humans, you have to understand what humans are. So in a way, it was a journey into myself, and
you probably at some level felt you were out of balance.
Yes. Oh, I was more than out of balance. I was a very unhappy teenager and very, very, very unhappy young man. Very unhappy. And these were all extreme moves to try to sort of rectify that. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to recalibrate myself. So that whole sense of like God left me, you know, or I left God, or I don't know really. I mean, it was a mixture of both things. So it was a really painful and difficult time of my life. Most of my teenage years and young adulthood, including traveling, was just really confrontational with myself.
Did you travel on your own?
I did. I travelled on my own, and I did really extreme things. Like I travelled most of the way across America hitchhiking. You know, I travelled all the way around Australia hitchhiking. I lived in a tent that was no bigger than 2 foot high. It was like living in a coffin. And I never stayed in a hotel. I never stayed. I rarely stayed at the backpackers except for in Asia. You know, I mean, I could go on. We could cover just the, you know, our time together just in that period and what I experienced. You know,
were quite you know, you were independent in a way.
Yeah, totally, fiercely. You know, I was one of the few people that went independently, illegally into Tibet. You know, there was only a handful of people that have ever really did that at that time in history. You know, at that time, you know, I travelled illegally from China around the sort of the back way into Tibet and sat on a truck for 3 days, being sat on top of, mainly because they were hiding me to get to Tibet. You know,
Right.
I did, yeah,
And what did you do in Tibet?
I was on this mission. You know, I was on this mission to find myself and find out what the meaning of life is. But actually before that experience, you know, I was in Australia and I was trying to earn money to keep going with the travelling, and I found this telephone sales job in Perth in Australia, working for a drug rehabilitation centre. Anyway, I made loads of money out of it. It was quite unethical in a way because I got 50% of the money, but and I didn't want to. I wanted to save my money, so what I did was I used to sneak back in the evening and sleep on the floor of the business, and of course they caught me, you know. But there was a very generous man there, and he said, "Why don't you come and stay in my house?" So I slept on his couch whilst I was making this money. And in his library, he had one very thin book, and I just picked it open, and it said meditation. And I said to him, I said, "You know, when I go to India, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to do this." He says, "Oh, you don't have to go to India." He says, "How we get these drug addicts, they were mothers, off their addiction, yeah, is we give them a 10-day meditation course, and I can do that for you. I can arrange that." So I said, "That's really great. I'd really like to do that." And I didn't really have an idea what I was letting myself in for. It just had a load of tick boxes. You can't talk, you can't take writing paper. You know, it was a very extreme, strict thing.
Was it a Goenka one?
It was, yeah. It was.
Been there, done that. Never
yes,
again.
yes. So there's a whole story with that as well. So and basically, I finished this work and I went out and I went hitchhiking again. And in Australia, there's these massive gold mines, and I hitch out to a place called Kalgoorlie, which is a long way from Perth. It's 600 miles away. And I was hitchhiking out of Kalgoorlie to come back to Perth. And this big truck pulls up, opens the door. He says, "Can you drive a truck?" I said, "Yeah, of course I could drive a truck." You know, I'm not sure I could actually, but I said I could. He says, "Get in. I need a truck. I need a driver now, you know, to take this truck." So he got in another truck, I got in, and I started driving this truck down, I didn't know where really, but anyway, we ended up, I don't know, 4 hours in the middle of nowhere. It was to this massive gold mine where they were doing a drilling rigs. And the guy said to me, he said, you know, you seem like a nice guy. I need a driver and I need somebody to help me. Would you mind, would you be willing to stay? I'll give you, I think it was either $600 or $800 a week to work in this gold mine. So I calculated it up. That's a lot of money. You know, you're going to get a lot of money in a short period of time. And I looked at him and I said, no, I can't do that. I've got to go and do this meditation course. And so I went back. I did this meditation course, this 10-day meditation course, which is, you're right, it was a Goenka course, which is pretty strict. And they kept coming up to me and they're saying, you keep smiling and laughing and you seem to be very happy. And everybody around you's unhappy, and usually people really suffer on these courses.
Yeah.
But you seem to be lapping it up. I said, I found what I'm looking for.
Ah.
This is it. This is it.
And what was it you'd found?
I'd really found peace in, actually, really.
Yeah.
And at that point, I could completely understand my mind of how it was working at that point in time, not now, but at that point in time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got, what I got was very pleasant, very, very pleasant sensations and a release of suffering that I'd never experienced in my life. And
that must have been a wonderful experience for you.
it was the most amazing thing. I remember after leaving that course and eating an orange, and it was so blissful. It was so amazing. It was incredible experience, and I committed then to living an ethical life. I followed the 5 Buddhist precepts from then on. I was supposed to be going to Bangkok and have a good time, and I committed to meditating every day whilst I was travelling, which I pretty much did do. And
so did you then, is that when after that you went up to China and Tibet?
yeah. I actually, when I look back now, I actually followed a really Buddhist route, you know, because I also went to I went all over Asia. So I went to Indonesia and Malaysia and, you know, lots of places. I was following this Buddhist route in a way. I mean, and then after Tibet, I stayed along.
What,
in
you
Tibet,
mean going from temple to temple or something?
not temple to temple so much, but I did do a lot of Goenka courses. So I did another 10-day course in Thailand. Yeah, and then I went to Nepal, and the Nepalese center was so beautiful, so inspiring, that I lived and ran and became managers of the courses. I lived in that center for, I think, if I'm right, maybe 4 or 5 months. And I didn't leave the center. I left the center once. All I did was back-to-back 10-day courses, and I only sat one 10-day course, and I served.
Were there Westerners there? Was it a
Yeah, Westerners, and it was very hardcore. It was full of a lot of Israeli ex-army people that were intense suffering, and I used to be up all night with some of them. They were really in bad shape, and the course was extremely intense. You know, these are really intense courses, and they were really big. You know, there was 150 people, but I learned a lot about applying Vipassana, the Goenka technique.
What did you learn then?
Well, you learn how to really let go, and you learn how to use your, the sense of awareness of vibrations of body sensations to really look after yourself. But in the process, what that did was it what I would call it defrosted me. So it defrosted me really big, and I saw some really quite amazing peak experience things.
And is that because when you attend to pain and you really attend to it, then it changes?
Well, when you attend to pain, there isn't any.
Yes, so that's a defrosting in a way.
Yeah, you defrost, and I defrosted a huge amount of my own personal in that process, because when you're serving others, you're letting go of yourself. You're not paying attention to your so much. Of course, there's a dual awareness in that, which is that you can observe your own feelings whilst being with others. But at that point in time, I was just defrosting, and I had a highly traumatized background, so that really threw me in a way.
So in a way, would you say that at that point it was less a question of who am I than how can I heal?
No, at that point it was how can I heal?
Yes,
Yes, it was how can I heal, but the who am I was so central to that
yes,
because I understood at that point, like when you get down to the Goenka method is really, it's, it's a sort of, it's a vibrational approach, which is that you get to feel sensations, and then under sensations you feel vibrations, and then through that they dissolve, and then you see emptiness. And so when you have that first, that experience of vibration is one of also noticing change.
yes.
Yeah. So
And you understood what it was about, and you had faith in the process.
oh, totally, yeah. But I was also enculturated by the process, so I always thought, oh, that's the only way. That's the way to do it. But in that whole process, because I started seeing monks and monks, that something awoke in me, from that from wanting. I really wanted to be a monk. I wanted to live that life. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to live that life. And when I was in Thailand, I had also stayed in a Buddhist temple by this very famous Thai monk called Ajahn Buddhadasa, and he was a renegade in terms of his teachings. And there I'd got introduced to the Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest tradition, and I'd got books, and this had set me on a trajectory which was I was going to become a monk.
So when you look back on it, why now? Why do you think now you became a monk?
I became a monk because, well, there's two things, there's two processes in that. So first one was there was no option, right? It was a clear calling. So I didn't do any research, right? Very little research. I just had this such strong urge. You see, I came back to England after this 4 years of travelling. I went and lived in a Goenka centre for another, I think, year and a half or 2 years. And I couldn't stop the calling. I couldn't, in England, I couldn't stop the calling. I've got to become a monk. And I left the Goenka centre in England. I cycled to the monastery. And I just had this...
Amaravati.
Amaravati. And I had this clarity. I call it clarity now, but I had this absolute knowing I had to become a monk.
So
and
just
so
to make clear, Amaravati is a Buddhist centre just north of London, just for listeners. But I mean, just before you go on to that, you went to Tibet. Why did you, and what happened in Tibet?
Well, just it's such a...
Has a mystique.
It has more than it's more than a mystique. There's the it's just a powerful place. Do you know what I mean? Because not a lot at that time, not a lot of Westerners had gone, and I was I went there because that's what you're supposed to do, type of thing. Do you know what I mean? That's where the Dalai Lama is. I met the Dalai Lama in India later on, but I went there. I don't actually know why I went there. It was on the list, type of thing, and it was just it was just one of those things that I had to do, and I was very well protected. It's really bizarre. So I went to the furthest point in China, and I was stuck. I didn't know how to get from this point to start to get into what's illegal for Westerners in Tibet. It's called the Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture. So I went for a walk, and I ended up in a Tibetan monastery, and I was having this meditation practice. So I went and sat with the monks. I was quite arrogant. I just went and sat with them, and they all got a bit upset and said, "You've got to leave, go out." But one of the monks came up to me, he said, like, he tried to say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm trying to get to see the Dalai Lama, and I had a picture of him, I'm going to India, I want to go to Tibet." And he just went like this. And I thought, so sorry, I draw, I'm drawing a half circle, a semicircle. And he drew that semicircle on the ground, and I thought, he's telling me there's another way to get to Tibet. There's another way, there's another route, there's something that I'm missing. So I went back, I asked in the hotel, and they said, "Oh yeah, there's this bus ride that you can get on." Yeah, but from that bus ride, it was completely illegal for Westerners to do that. I knew that. So I hid everything. I hid myself. I got on the bus. And as soon as I got on this bus, this kid came to me and he spoke fluent English. He says, "What are you doing on the bus? Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Tibet." He says, "Okay, you're coming to my house. You can come and stay with me." And he knew it was illegal. And I stayed in his house, and he got me on the road to this illegal trip to Tibet, and he put me on hitchhiking, and then I found the next person, and so on and so forth.
Quite an adventure.
Yeah, so I was really guided in that way through all of this. And if I just come back to the story about the monastery, so in the first place is this calling and clarity part,
Yeah.
but the deeper side of it was that I was very traumatized, and that really going to the monastery was a place of safety, and it was like it's very hard to explain that when I went to the monastery I fell in love. This place was so beautiful and so welcoming and so loving, and
the abbot there was it Sumedo at the time?
No, actually it wasn't. He was there, but oh no, he was. Yes, he was the abbot then. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he'd just taken it back. Ajahn Sumedo, he was the abbot. Yeah, and I had just arrived. I arrived at the time of the temple opening, when the official temple opening. So every meditation teacher you could think of who was anybody arrived just as a few weeks after I arrived, about a month after I arrived. And it was quite an extraordinary experience to see all these teachers come from all over the world to Amaranatho to bless the temple, to open the temple. And
so what year was this?
Oh God. I can't really remember. I think around 2000 the temple opened, and I became a novice. I became a anagarika, which is like a postulant, a pre-novice monk, in 2001, and I never left there again. I was just completely committed to that way of life. And yeah, I mean, at the detriment of in the beginning, at the detriment from my family and everything. So, yeah, but it didn't matter. Yeah.
So, what did you get from it then? From being there and from meditation and
overall, in the end.
Yeah, looking back on it, I mean,
yeah, I completely. So it's a really it's so tricky, these things, but ultimately I found out who I was. I mean, ultimately, yeah. I mean, I did. It was an amazing journey, but it was a complicated one as well, because there was a lot of politics, and it got very messy. I lived at Amaranatho for 10 years, and then I decided to leave there, and I went freelance for another 5 and travel around the world under my own steam. And
at what point in that journey, that 10 years and then that 5 years or whatever, did you come across the headless way?
I actually came across the headless way at the monastery, because there was a fellow monk there who introduced me to Douglas and to his teachings. And then I had a lot of the abbot of the monastery, Ajahn Sumedo, just pointed to, this is it. Actually, he was always saying, stop meditating, Amaranatho, because I had this mindset of meditation. I'd done so much sitting practice. I could sit for hours. I thought that to be a good meditator, I'd heard somewhere you need to sit for 7 hours without moving, and I could do 5 hours and long stretches and all this stuff. But he said, stop meditating. So I had to.
What did you make of that?
Well, and now I make it was that I had a mindset of a meditator, and that's a block, rather than actually understanding what is the purpose of meditation. And he was saying, well, to wake up, to find out who you are, to rest, embrace anatta, which is non-self, absence of self. And so all these concepts, I started to, it all started to sort of click a little bit, and but then I was introduced to Douglas's book, on having no head, which didn't quite make sense in the beginning, and I had to work at it a bit. But anyway, I started to see Douglas's, the headlessness and emptiness really clearly, and I had this doubt about, being a monk even then again, and
what was
and
your
the whole,
doubt?
I think then it was really being caught in a tradition, yeah. And so I asked to do a 3-month retreat, a solitary 3-month retreat, and the monastery had been given a house in a place called Boyton. I looked that place up, Boyton, and it happened to be 7 miles from Douglas's house.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started, that's where I started to meet Douglas and Catherine quite a lot. As I went down and did quite a few retreats in his house. So I would always stop off and see Douglas, and I went to see him before that as well.
So what did you make of the fact that here was someone who was seeing who was not a monk?
That didn't bother me, actually.
Oh.
That didn't bother me.
But I mean, did it inspire you to leave?
No, it didn't. No, that was not that wasn't the inspiration to leave. The inspiration to leave was the same reason that I joined, which was I've just always trusted in this moment of knowing.
And when was the moment? What happened?
That I was doing another long. So I was in Australia as a monk. This last part of my monastic career, and I had a really lovely time in Perth in Australia, and I was and I was on a 6-week solitary retreat in the outback in Perth. And because I'd been so busy, I'd been running lots of retreats and workshops, and really combining this, headlessness and awareness with personal development and all these really funky things that I really enjoyed doing, lots of retreats. And so it was a really busy time. And if you go into a 6-week silent retreat, if you just go in and bam, and you go hardcore on the first day, it's such a shock to the system, I found. And I learned this, through the monks actually in the monastery, a way of winding down. So in that first week in the monastery, on that retreat, I took a couple of books. One was about community, and the other one was about childhood development. And so I read these 2 books in the first week while sort of winding down and starting to meditate more in a formal way. And I woke up one morning with this thought which just said, stop being a monk. And it was not, there was no thinking around it. It's really clear. I didn't think that my way to that point, it just arose, and it was a moment of absolute clarity. And I knew from the way that I entered the monastery, it was that same moment, it was that same absolute knowing. And all I did was I just doubted that thought for the next, whatever it was, 6 weeks. I kept saying to myself, is this really the case? And every time I'd hear a yes, and then I left there and I went back to where I was living, which was really nice, and I had everything I really wanted in my life. I'd just been offered a piece of land to build my own sort of monastery. And it still came up, you have to leave. So that's what I did. I had to leave, and that was it. I had about 4 weeks after that time to leave Australia, because I had a religious workers visa, so everything moved quite fast after that. And that was it, yeah.
So from your point of view now,
yes,
what do you think, how do you relate headlessness with meditation and even mindfulness? I don't know if those are the same things for you or not. Go
on, sorry.
Well, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question, and I thought maybe we could just do it practically, if that would be all right. We could just explore it now, if that's all right.
Yes.
So I'd like to just give a very short mindfulness exercise now that we just do all together. The listener can do it if they like. So it's just a body-based practice. So if we do it together, then I'd just like to explore that. Is that all right?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, great. Okay. So what I would encourage you to do is just, I'm saying this for the people listening, is just to make yourself physically comfortable. You don't have to put yourself in a position of meditation, but something that keeps your back straight and your head and shoulder fairly upright. And just to sort of attend to the present moment, and the way that I like to do that.
So we've got our eyes open or closed?
Yeah, you can do it closed if you like. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, if you want. And to bring your attention to your breathing, and a way of doing that is just, I've found can be helpful, especially if you're new to this, is to put your hand on your belly and sort of breathe into your hand, so you get this sense of breathing in the belly, and just to receive the way that your body is. And just to notice the physical, sometimes where we hold tension, our shoulders. Not try to get rid of it, but just to notice how it is. Notice how your back is, your legs, knees, ankles, and just this quality of breathing in and breathing out, the mouth gently closed, breathing through the nose. And what I'd just like to encourage you is just, if you see what it's like to extend, we're just going to play with the breath, which is just to extend the out breath. So it's called 7-11 breathing. So if you breathe in for 7 and out for 11. And then out for 11. So your out breath is slightly longer than your in breath. And if you're an experienced, you've got some experience of meditation, you might also be able to observe this process of breathing in for 7 and breathing out for 11, and noticing what that's like. So if you just do this for a few more breaths, and then a few more times. Breathing in for 7, breathing out for 11. And maybe your thoughts are running around a bit, that's also all right. And then just let go of that 7-11 breathing, and just survey your body and your mind and the quality of what it's like, how it feels right now, just by this short paying attention to the body and the breath, and slightly changing the way that we breathe. And then when you're ready, you can just open your eyes and come back. So I wonder how was that experience for you, Richard?
It's calming.
It's calming, isn't it? It's really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just a manipulation of the nervous system. The 7-11 breathing works with the vagus nerve, which allows us to calm down, But what I notice is that this has got the mindset of the observer, somebody observing and somebody doing a practice.
Yes.
Right. So you can get into all of that. You can have fantastic experiences and feel wonderful and blissed out, and your body feels great, It's all fantastic. But it has nothing to do with headlessness at all. The sense of being awake here is, there is no, when I look here right now, I don't see any vibrations or calm or peace or vagus nerve or nothing. I don't see that.
In terms of headless jargon, it's what's happening in the content.
Yes.
And you're not articulating the space that you're aware of it from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So these are two different things, and to get caught up in this, so a lot of the mindfulness movement is about just, making your body comfortable, and healing certain things, which is really good for.
And is it also, often perhaps a misconception about meditation is that it's about stopping thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and that I was really, see, that was the great gift of being in the monastery, was that Ajahn Sumedho was a master of what is called Chittanapassana, which is mind, being aware of the mind, being aware of thoughts. And that was fundamentally different from the Goenka technique. So Goenka was much more about being aware of sensations, and sort of don't worry too much about the thoughts. And what I learned in the monastery was to really have the ability to observe and not react to the thinking process, and that really freed me up, because I've got an extremely fast mind, and I've got a very I can think multiple things at the same time, and so I could never really calm my mind down. And so
was Sumedho clear then that it was not about stopping thinking, it was about being aware of thinking?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I never really got caught up in that, although, because that idea of stopping thinking, the only way you can really stop thinking is by having a frontal lobotomy, to take the executive function out. You can calm it down through the jhana practices, the more concentration techniques.
A bit like what we just did.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to in the end, you have to return, right? So you have to return
to ordinary life.
Yes, return to ordinary life, and so that whole idea of trying to control or stop your thinking process,
So how do you make in your own mind, I don't know, the step from mindfulness, awareness of breathing and thoughts calming, to being aware of who you really are?
So classically, the classic thing is that, and this is even within Buddhism, is that the observer has to collapse on itself, right? So that you use the observing mind to collapse, or subject object, or whatever you want to call it. And if you get caught up in mindfulness or meditation, what you do is you prolong that process, because you're just always in the observer mind. You're always observing something, rather
as if you're a thing observing something.
Yes, that's right. And you become a thing. You become a meditator, which is what I did. I became a meditator. And then headlessness just completely steps over that totally. You just have a direct seeing of pure subjectivity. And so why would you want to meditate? Well, actually, I think one of the reasons you would want to meditate is that mindfulness is a way of remembering. That's all. It's a way of remembering as who you are. So you just use it as a remembrance practice. And the other part of mindfulness, which I found, I've gone back to a bit of a formal practice, because I've been diagnosed with high eye pressure. And the research says that one of the best things besides medication for high eye pressure is mindfulness. It reduces high eye pressure by 25%. So it's interesting that that's on a physical level.
So mindfulness, in the sense of awareness of breathing, can be used to calm the nervous system and to help you physically.
Yeah, it can help you physically. And if you're it can also allow you to see who you are, but that journey is a lot longer than just pointing here as well.
What do you mean?
Well, if you keep observing really, and you observe the observer, that all dissipates. It does. That's also my experience in more formal meditation practices. That there is all of that. That
you mean if you persevere long enough, finally you are the space observing whatever's going on.
Oh well, not even that. The observer goes. You recognize just pure subjectivity. That's it. Well, but the headless way is a lot easier in this way, because you're directly seeing who you are. And so at that point, when in my own development as a monk, you're just sandpapering. You're sandpapering the ego, so the ego gets really reduced in a way, and you can clearly see more of who you are. And of course, I also had a ton of psychotherapy to go with it, which also helped. So that's for me, that's what happened.
Yes.
But that, so do you need a formal meditation practice to practice headlessness? No, of course you don't. You can see, anybody can see it for themselves.
So one of the things that, as I understand it, in terms of meditation Buddhism, is
Yeah,
metta, which is
yeah,
sort of loving kindness.
yeah,
How do you relate to that now from your awareness of headlessness, who you really are, whatever you want to call it?
yeah.
Do you do that? Do you do a
I don't because in a way the space aware being headless doesn't have metta in it. There is nothing. There's or you call it love or unconditional love. Metta means unconditional love. There is none of that there because it just is. This is what it is.
It's just empty.
It doesn't have any qualities. But you can go upstream and use it. So upstream, I mean, in terms of your personality, and you can develop and embrace metta and unconditional, a sort of unconditional positive regard or unconditional love. And my basic characteristic as a personality is anger, right? And in Buddhism, the opposite for anger is to develop metta, and the traditional metta practices, you see, comes from a cult, comes originally from an Indian culture where you would have seen a lot more metta, a lot more kindness in your early years, and you would have had that wired into you, and so you could have re-accessed it as a personality. In the West, we don't have that. We rarely get that as children, and we don't really see it that much, in a Western educated society. So I remember once I went with a monk. A monk came over from Asia whose only practice was metta. So all you do all day long, I went on a 7-day retreat with him and practiced metta. And one of the classic ways of developing metta within the Buddhist tradition is, you think about a family member you really love and all of this. It just didn't work for me. I don't have that connection, that conditioning in my body with that amount of love, right? And so it wouldn't start. The engine wouldn't start, and I just got in a really mess with it all. So that's not the case now, right? It's different. I can, and then Goenka had a different method of metta, which was also quite beautiful as well.
Yes.
So and also science gives us something much better, also in terms of, a heart coherence, where you go into your heart and you really sit in it, and you breathe into your heart and you breathe these positive, these lovely words of love and all of the rest of it, and that really does work for me, and then that's a beautiful space to be in, and also to connect with other people. If I drop into it now. There's just this
smiling.
Yeah, there's just this warm-hearted openness towards you, Richard, towards the space. That I can receive the world. Right now the Queen's died. I can receive her in that space. The suffering that's going on in the world. It's and I can feel that love and connection.
So you are someone who has committed yourself at certain points in your life fully to in particular to being a monk and to meditation. You've left that world now, and I'm imagining you have lots of different thoughts about that world, but do you now have a sense of what you're committed to?
I never committed to Buddhism, although, my name's Amaranatho. I mean, I kept that because so much of my life has been, but, I'm committed to a headlessness or awareness or whatever you want to call it, God, I don't know, whatever that word is. I'm committed to that, and I'm committed to where that takes me. Right, so that brought me into the monastery. It brought me into my, this traumatized part of myself. It brought me out of the monastery. He brought me into relationship, and that's all I'm committed to. That's it. That hasn't changed. It doesn't matter about the outside appearance. I don't really care about that so much, you know, whether I was wearing monk's robes or jeans or whatever, or naked even, but it doesn't matter. What I am committed to is that, and living from this in every experience. And I put it under every, you know, I've tested this out relentlessly, you know, when you know, I've been ill lots and lots of times, unfortunately, you know, and I keep testing it out. I tested it out when I had a anaphylactic, you know, I had a huge reaction where my throat got swelled up and all the rest of it, you know, my breathing stopped.
What do you mean you tested it out?
Well, I tested it. I said, you know, so your body's shaking all over the place. You can't breathe, yeah, and can you see who you are?
I see.
You know, yeah, and then I think, yeah, I can. Can I use my calming technique? Yes, I can. You know, so calm the body down as it's flipping them all over the place, yeah, and then rest in this space, you know. And then after that experience, I had to go to hospital. They checked my blood pressure, and it was even, you know. But it's not, you know, I'm not saying I have equanimity all the time, you know.
If someone, I mean, from your experience now,
yeah,
which draws on, you know, both Buddhism and the headless way and therapy and all your life experiences.
Yeah.
So if someone says to you now, this headlessness is a common question. I can see who I am, but how do I keep it going? What's your response to that? How do you keep it? What's your advice?
My advice is that you also include your personality in that equation.
Okay.
And that you get to know yourself more clearly, which also can happen through recognizing who you are, so that you can. Because what I found is that when I'm not aware, then I'm caught up in my personality. I'm caught up in some thoughts, which for me right now is, you know, different sets of conditions. And by knowing those conditions much more clearly, I can think, well, I don't need to. I can just let that be as it is, you know. And then the other thing, which has been really helpful, is that you know, I've trained myself. Even I trained myself as a monk to use outside experiences to remember who I am. Right. So I have to put eye drops in every day now. That's my experience. So I have to lift up my head, hold the thing, so there's something pointing. So then I just use that. That's a reminder. Stay empty. Or, you know, this is a bit of a unpleasant experience. It's going to sting, and then it goes in, and then, you know, like that. You know, or when I'm out, or when I'm on the train, or when I spend a lot of my time with video calls. I train myself to, you know, not in a beating myself up way, not in a unkind way, not in a this is a ritual and I'm going to give you a handbook and all the other things, but just actually use daily life, to see, being on the train, you know, being on the plane, you know, has anybody moved? No, nobody's gone anywhere, you know, being sick, having a joyous experience, you know. And then when it's not there, you know, like I watched this really lovely video film on Friday. It was fantastic, you know. So do I do that? No, I just have a really nice time watching the film, because I know it's all fake and all the rest of it, but hey, it's a really lovely experience. In the end, it comes down to trusting yourself, really trusting your own experience, to really, you know, see it for yourself, you know, put it under the scrutiny, you know. Which is more peaceful? Where is there peace? Real peace? You know, is it in Amaranatho that goes ups and downs and gets moody and struggles sometimes and doesn't get things right, or has a nice time and it's all really pleasant experience and all the rest of it? Or is it in this space?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were just speaking before this call about, you know, this whole sense of, you know, that there's no end destination, you know, and that, and I think that's so important, you know, to see that it's a continued lived experience, and that's what's also so exciting about it. what's it like now? How is it now? Live from this place.
One of the things that I find really pleasurable, interesting, inspiring, helpful is having friends like you that
Yes,
I can talk to about this, and that you've got quite different experience from me, and you different language and all of that, but we're coming from the same emptiness, and we know that. So being able to talk with others is really helpful. I mean, I know that you're in relationship with your partner, and she shares seeing. Is that relevant there? Is that important for you that you're
it's
sharing?
that was so I had a criteria about who, if I was going to find a partner after disrobing, what it what I wanted,
Yeah,
and I was only going to choose. I had that as that was my number one priority. That I was only going to find a partner that would have this common understanding,
yeah,
and so that is absolute blessing,
yeah,
because there isn't a day that goes by that we're not talking about or sharing this or using it when things are difficult, you know because they will be difficult. It's not, this is the human realm. I mean,
yeah,
it's,
sure.
and so, and that's a really, it's been so much. I've had so much growth in terms of Amaranatho personality,
Yeah,
of being in a relationship through headless, through that space, because then it allows so much more to come up, and this whole sense of this social aspect, I think, is just so important.
yeah,
It's so important. you know I mean, it's interesting because in some way I've taken this until you just said it, then I just took it for granted. When I said I was at home at the monastery, it's because of having that sort of friendship in a way, and then, being part of the headless community, and, sharing in that way, and listening to other people's experience and being able to share that and say that, I think it's so important, because we are social beings. And interestingly, all the work that I did as a monk was all around the interpersonal side of mindfulness, or this,
uh,
you know, how to be with one another in it, because it is so important to have friends, to be
one
able
of the
to
things
share
that,
this with.
yes,
Yeah.
I love a very simple thing is being aware that your voice and my voice are happening in the same consciousness.
Yes.
No, that is just, then you sort of switch from, me being Richard and you being Amma, to being the space in which both of us are happening. Now, that is
Yes.
such a wonderful thing, isn't it? I can't praise it too highly. We are separate and we're one. And when you find the oneness, then I become you and you become me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that, it's so it's so interesting, because really, then at that point, I also find there's nothing to say.
And how you do go on about it.
And how I do go on about it, isn't it interesting? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it is. It's just. It's.
Well, one of the
Yeah.
things with that is my delight that the experience is non-verbal. So then that takes the pressure off trying to define it, and you can enjoy talking without being too legalistic about it all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a major relief. Because I think also in the monastery you can get into the technicality of,
Yeah.
oh, this means that and that means that, and you know and luckily I didn't get into that, but a lot of the tradition is focused around that technicality, because of it being caught up in you've got to do this to get that, to get the other.
Mm.
And yeah, but yeah, so I do in yeah, go on, sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
I just thinking about what you were saying. I got the impression that now in your life, and perhaps you always, for a long time, you've lived um, lived in the way that you are open and seeing what happens, and that's living from this true nature, isn't it? I mean,
it
even this
is. Yeah,
conversation,
absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of amazing, like like yesterday on Friday I watched this movie, yeah, and then we were just talking with my partner on Saturday about the movie, and then I said something, right, and these things came out. I thought that's amazing, like if like, and I'd really like to attribute it to Amaranatho, I'd love to say that was me, but when I look back at those things, I can't. Like I can't find where it came from. Do you know what I mean? I can't
yes,
find the points, and so like trying to attribute it, give me the 5 stars and all the rest of it. It's just impossible. I
yeah.
and
But
that's a miracle, yeah,
it
really.
is,
Yeah.
and so although one calls this the void, it's an incredibly creative, fertile place, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely, it's incredible, really. I mean, it is truly, yeah, it's just really amazing, really, really amazing
Yes,
to put your, to put for me to put my trust in that, and then just see what comes from that.
yes,
And sometimes it's, you scary, and personality wants to get in the way again and reclaim it and say it's me and all of that.
mm.
And that's also the beauty of also having friends and all the rest of it, because that all gets put again back into perspective, you
Yes.
know.
And
And
other people's realizations at that level are your own.
yes, yeah, that's, yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. And yeah, yeah, exactly. And then of course all of this. The other thing that was really impactful about the headlessness, and just really seeing that, is that once you see from this place, this incredible creativity, is that when you start reading scriptures or any of these things, it all comes alive.
Yes.
It just takes a totally different meaning, like, so, I was saying about my Jewish background, and I still support the Jewish community. I got involved with them when I was a monk. They invited me to go back, and I still do that work. So I've been working with a lot of Jewish men for a long time now, and also introducing them to headlessness. Uh, but it's this, so, and some of the retreats we've run, we themed them on what the Jewish scripture, the Old
Mm.
Test, the Bible says. And of course, when you read it on a one level, it's like gobbledygook, right? It doesn't really mean much. But when you read it from this void, it's a complete. It becomes so alive. Do you need the
Yes.
technology? No, you don't. But if it's your first language, okay, well, fine.
Yeah.
And the same with Buddhism, and the same with other
Well, I was thinking,
teachers.
yes, I was thinking recently of a quotation a lot of people will know from Rumi. There is a field
Yeah,
where I am you or something, and you are me. I will meet you there. And I
yeah,
thought, well, actually, that I am there now, Rumi,
yes,
and I'm
yes,
saying hello to you now, Rumi. Your voice now is in me, and hello. As you say, you understand these things that people say in a new way, and you hear where it's coming from.
you hear where isn't that amazing? You hear
Yeah,
where I just think that's so incredible.
incredible. I
It
mean,
is incredible.
yeah, because
You,
the space is not in time or space. So my voice is coming out the same place that those words of Rumi came from.
yeah, it's
Incredible.
it's it's incredible. And I think the other thing that is that, and this is, I think, pretty unique, is that once you see this, all the other stuff that other spiritual teachers might try and pull fast ones on, and give you a tug here or there and everywhere, it just doesn't work, because you know what's what. and that, you know, and then you think, so do you know?
Yeah.
So why are you playing those games? You know, there's no, you don't. Why are you doing that? And I think that's absolutely, that's revolutionary, because in that way, you know, and also I see, maybe, I mean, this is my own view, that, you know, the world, we become much more flat in terms of society. You know, there's a natural hierarchy, you know, and then there's the, you know, but in terms of our experience of who we are, that's flat, and nobody can pull those numbers anymore. And I think that's such, you know, the modern jargon of empowering, but I think it really is to empower people to see that. Yeah, because then that's real. That is real trust. That is real ownership. And when you put that within a social context, you know, and you start sharing that and speaking from that, that's
when you
rocket
hang out
fuel
with others who are aware of that, you enjoy that together.
Oh yes, oh yeah, because there's
Because what?
Well, because there's no competition, there's nothing in the way. There's just, well, you're sharing from that place. It can be, you know, it's so much fun, you know. And also, you know, like when I came as a monk, you know, there was also this absolute level of acceptance, you know. And now I come not as a monk, and there's still the same level of acceptance.
You're still the same old void.
Yeah, exactly, the same old void. Nothing's changed, you know.
You haven't changed at all.
No, isn't that that is amazing though, you know, to think that you've not changed one iota all through this whole damn journey, not once, nothing's changed. God, that's just mind blowing, isn't it? Really, and that, you know, and I can say that to you, and you recognise that in yourself.
Yeah,
isn't that? I mean, it's joyous.
It is. It's wonderful, yes.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wonder about your thoughts on is I, as you know, have this view that becoming aware of who you really are is a natural phase of development. So from a baby, you become aware of what you look like, and that is normal. And then you identify with the one in the mirror, you know, and as an adult, you've forgotten the space. It's still there, but you're not aware of it. You're identified with being a person. And then the next natural phase is to reawaken to your true nature. It's not anything out of the ordinary. But I imagine you'd agree with that.
Totally. And I mean, yeah, I do think that it's a developmental journey.
Yes. Because I mean, there's this idea in some places that being aware of who you really are is somehow on a different track and just out of the ordinary, whereas it's not.
No. How you know, how could it be? Because like, even when we say that language, it means that there's already a split. So there is something, and then doing something, and then some other experience. So that doesn't seem to tally up when I look here, when there is no split.
So what do you think the development is? What in this what we might call, you know, the baby, child, adult seer? In the stage of the seer, what are the characteristics, do you think? Because you can easily, if we put it in that normal developmental model, then you can pick out various stages of development and what is healthy and what is not healthy. Do you have any, off the top of your head, any thoughts about that?
I have quite a lot of thoughts about that. And I notice I feel slightly nervous about this particular area, because I've put a lot of effort into it myself about exploring this. Okay. A lot, yeah, and it's also the way that I've worked. So it's a sort of that old adage of, you know, is it immediate or gradual?
Oh, yeah.
You know, yeah, it's a sort of rehash of that. like the seer qualities are the things from the pointing out experiments. Like there's it's empty. There's no color, no shape, no thought, no pure subjectivity, not knowing, uncertainty, paradox. All these labels which mean nothing because there's no experience happening here anyway. And yet it includes all those experiences on the outward facing. And then I think those. It's that question of, well, what's required for that shift to happen.
What shift?
The shift from not seeing who you are and deciding to stay as an adult, to get caught up in that I am somebody and I am part of a culture and I'm part of society, to I'm not part of culture, I'm not part of society, I'm everything. My own personal way is I've worked developmentally with that, so I choose to not always go straight to headlessness with that in that way because of that.
You're working with someone as a client.
Yeah, and I I notice I'm a little bit. I always feel I'm cautious now. I'm treading cautiously with it. That.
If I can say something here, when I was a psychotherapist for many years, which I loved being a psychotherapist, I didn't talk about headlessness in therapy because they had not come for that. I mean, if on the rare occasions, maybe once or twice, someone asked about it, so I share it. But if they come for deal with bereavement or bullying at work. So it would be disrespectful to impose my thing.
Absolutely.
But it's where I'm coming from.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if you're working with a client, it sounds as though you would not introduce headlessness. I totally get that. But you're coming from headlessness, and you would work with whatever you felt was appropriate. Right.
Yes. So I'm not a therapist. I'm an executive coach, and maybe try and sort of maybe give a little example, which is I work with somebody who I can see from my meditation and mindfulness experience. Is really quite meditative and contemplative. So then I think, well, that in a way, that's just knowledge. Do you know what I mean? And then so how do you help a person like that just get more clear about themselves around that? And then see that whole subject-object world, that there is actually somebody observing that, and then through that there may be another conversation that could happen. But the point is to come from space first, as you said. It's
well, the development goes on. One is home and dry. One is seeing who one is, and that is 100%. And in the outward direction, as you called it, there is an unfolding, and that is never ending.
Never ending. Yeah, I mean, and my journey from leaving the monastery has been so powerful, really, of just seeing so much more of myself in that. Has the space changed? No. Has Amaranatho changed? Yes. And also the capacity to receive all of that is. I'm surprised by it myself. And also to see the messiness and the craziness of Amaranatho and his moodiness and his up and down and.
Welcome to the club.
Exactly. But I think it's also. But I think it is. It's important that these things get shared in that way. Like that. So that it's not like otherwise. It's that goes back to that sort of you've got to be a perfect human being. But that's mixing the two places up. Perfection and equanimity and all that is here. And you might have quite an equanimous, like we think about the Queen, I see her as having quite an equanimous, I don't know her, but I mean, seeing her as quite an equanimous personality, in terms of her experience, quite phenomenal in a way. But that isn't the same experience of equanimity that when I look here, that's different, because here
it's not an achievement, it's just given for everyone.
It's given for everyone, and it really doesn't change. No. I mean, it really does not. It does not move. It hasn't moved from the dial. Like one iota. whether Amaranatho's complaining or doesn't like it. Like yesterday, I was doing some DIY, and I'm not I'm learning how to do all this stuff since leaving the monastery, and the wind's blowing, the rain's coming in, and I'm wet and cold and fed up and swearing at the wind, and give me a break. And then it's all just a lark, and then and then it's all just a cosmic joke as well, isn't it? Because it's just like, well, yeah, it is. I can put on another jacket, I can wear another hat, I can close the door from the rain. They're all practical things. But here, it doesn't care whether the door gets fixed or not.
Well, wonderful to talk to you, Amaranatho. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention or add to the conversation?
No, I think it's been very rich. It's been so lovely speaking with you. And catching up in this way, really lovely.
Yeah,
really lovely. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Richard.
Well,
beautiful,
wonderful to be with you.
I guess also, yes, and I guess also just to acknowledge all the work that you do. That you do a tremendous amount of work, and I just thank you for that. Yeah.
A pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, a delight to have you in the space and to have you as a friend and
to
share you with listeners and to have two voices in one consciousness here.
Indeed, thank you.